The Killing Sea, Chapter 24. When the prayers were finished, Aisha grabbed Sarah's hand and tugged her to the rations line. More rice gruel served into coconut shells out of a big blackened pot. Sarah had no appetite, so she offered hers to the girl. The girl accepted with a grave nod of her head, and Sarah watched her daintily slurp the gruel, taking her time, unlike most of the others who gulped theirs. Moonlight had replaced twilight when Sarah finally headed back to the clinic. Several campfires also added a flickering glow to her uneven path. A shower of sparks rose from one of them. She glanced up. Somebody added a chunk of wood. The figure turned, and she recognized Ruslan's slender frame and his slightly hunched shoulders. A starburst of happiness filled her heart. "Ruslan!" she called out and ran up to him. "Hello, Sarah," he said. An anxiety was in his voice that hadn't been there before, a heavy anxiety. Her happiness faded a little. "What's wrong?" "My father," he said. "He didn't make it to the village. He was stopped here and his voice caught. He cleared it with a cough. "He was caught in the tsunami." Oh, that was all she could say. Look at those eyes of his, how much he was hurting. She gestured at the people in the camp. "They all survived. Your dad did too. You must believe he did." "Yes," Ruslan said. "Never give up hope." He had a sketch pad in his hand, and he squatted to draw something by the light of the fire. Sarah sat beside him. The starburst of happiness was gone. Her own anxiety came bubbling up. "I'm really worried about Peter. There isn't any medicine here. Aisha gave him some of that jamu stuff, but he really needs proper treatment and medicine." The way that girl had stopped her fight to breathe, just like that, gone. The rat was back in her stomach, gnawing with vicious bites. "Maybe there's medicine in Malabo," Ruslan said. "The hospital there was high. The flood didn't reach it." Sarah's brain grew lighter, lifted off her spine. "Ruslan, how come you didn't tell me before?" "I didn't know you wanted to know." He wasn't paying full attention to her, concentrating on his drawing, the face of a man. "God, Ruslan, if you told me about the hospital in Malabo, I would have gone there and not here. You kept talking about the doctor in Kalan. What do I know about this doctor? I thought you knew." Malabo. Now she had to get to Malabo. She was gathering her courage to ask Ruslan for help when something about the picture he was drawing caught her attention. She had seen this man before, with his broad forehead, lopsided chin, and slightly crooked teeth that Ruslan displayed in a kind smile. When Ruslan drew in the pupils, the drawing came alive. The man smiled at Sarah, as though ready to say hello. "I know him," she said. "Good. I'm going to show this to people. Maybe they've seen him." "Where have I seen him? It's right there, but I can't remember." "You can't remember?" Ruslan said. "He worked on your boat engine," and then with a touch of exasperation. "My father? That's not where I remember him from. Wait, I know. I saw him when I was in that little sailboat. He was on one of those children's water park boats, with the rear paddle wheel." Ruslan looked at her as though she was crazy. "On a paddle boat? I don't think so." "He was riding it to Malabo, pedaling hard." The implication finally registered. "This was after the tsunami. God, Ruslan, he's alive!" Ruslan absorbed that with a blank face. What surfaced, though, wasn't elation but suspicion. He had Sarah repeat everything in greater detail, listening skeptically, and as she did so, her conviction grew stronger. "It's him, Ruslan, it's him. He was going to Malabo to look for you." Ruslan took a deep, ragged breath, his skepticism flattened into a stunned look. "I think I saw him, too. I was walking on the beach, a Mickey Mouse boat." Yes, a Mickey Mouse boat, and he was holding a pole, like in Venice. Mickey Mouse, I mean." "And he was going to Malabo," Ruslan said. "Both of them were going to Malabo," Sarah said. With tears filling his eyes, Ruslan threw up his hands and exclaimed joyfully in his language. Then he grabbed her hand and pulled her in for a fervent kiss on both cheeks. His lips were soft and warm. For a fleeting second, Sarah imagined them on her own. Then, as they awkwardly straightened, their lips did brush together in an accidental touch. Ruslan jerked back. Even in this flickering light, she could see the dusky color rising up his slender neck. Could he see the same on hers? "We must go to Malabo," Ruslan said. "We must go tonight." "How?" "I have family. We'll ask them for help." A soldier jogged up the hill and spoke to Ruslan. Sarah caught the word commandant. Ruslan put an arm around Sarah and drew her close to whisper in her ear. "The parking lot at the bottom of the hill. The big truck. Meet me there when the moon is in the middle of the sky. If I am not there when the moon is half down again, you must walk to that hill where we were before. One of my family will be there. He will take you to Malabo." The soldier barked, prodding Ruslan to his feet with his rifle barrel. "Remember," Ruslan said over his shoulder to her. Sarah hurried to the clinic tent. A kerosene lantern had been hung from one of the aluminum ceiling struts. Its yellow flame cast a dim glow. The nurse transferred Peter to the dead girl's cot. Sarah forced herself to relax. Didn't mean anything. The cot wasn't cursed. At least Peter was sleeping. Sweat beaded his neck, dripped down his chest, marking trails in the dried paste. His forehead felt cooler to her touch, but his breathing seemed just as labored. A new nurse who looked as tired as the old one had made rounds with the aspirin pills. Sarah couldn't bring herself to wake Peter to take his half. She went outside and used the latrines, which were planks over holes in the ground, and a square of plastic sheeting to provide privacy. The stench was thick enough to float her off the ground. By a tree a short distance away, 3 soldiers in their underwear took a bucket bath from a well. "Miss, you want a bath?" One of the men called out to her as she exited. God, did she ever, but not with all those guys watching. The soldier who'd spoken came over with a sarong. "You take bath, no problem," he said, "no problem." He had a kind smile. But it was the little boy in his eyes, the fear and the loneliness, that made Sarah return the smile and take the sarong. He gave her a sliver of soap and shooed away the other guys. Tucking the sarong around her shoulders, using that garment for her modesty, she bucketed water over herself. Salty as the other well where she had a rinse, but just as clean. As she bathed, she stomped on her dirty bikini bottom in her shorts and t-shirt. The soap left a wonderful fragrance on her skin. It felt almost sacrilegious to put her wet and still dirty clothes back on. She returned the wet sarong to the soldier and thanked him. "No problem," he said again. In the tent, she lay down by Peter's cot. She didn't want to sleep, had to watch the moon. "Middle of the sky," Ruslan had said, but sleep overtook her anyway. She woke in a panic, certain she'd overslept, but the moonlight on the tent's thin fabric was still low. Peter stirred and muttered in his dreams. Of what? Their mother dancing? She dozed and woke several times. Finally, it was time. She shook Peter awake. "Peter, you have to go to the bathroom." "Huh? Come, I'll take you to the bathroom." He was too disoriented to protest. She held his head, leading him out of the tent. The guard sleeping at the front desk groggily lifted his head from his cradling arms. "Bathroom," Sarah whispered to him. He put his head down again. Outside the tent, Sarah picked up Peter and carried him with his arms slung around her neck. His ragged breaths were hot on her chin. She carried him along the darkest shadows of the hill's sparse tree line. In the moonlight, the ruins of the town below her looked like chewed bones. In the green command tent, a bright light shone behind the canvas. Voices murmured. One rose in anger. A thud. Mocking laughter. She hurried on. No one was about. The parking lot where the big truck stood had once been a schoolyard. Remnants of the playground's painted white lines were still visible. She scurried down a path bulldozed by the school's rubble, through the school's rubble to the parking lot, nearly tripping once on a loose brick. "Ruslan," she whispered. "Ruslan!" No reply. In the distance came the sound of waves surging on an unseen beach. Once that had been a soothing sound, but for a second her skin prickled, and she wanted to dash back up the hill. She put Peter down in the deepest shadows between the truck's rear wheels and a motor scooter. He came awake. "What are we doing?" "Having more fun," she said. "Are they looking for Dad yet?" "He's looking for us." Sarah was certain of it. Her father was the sort of man who digged barehanded through a granite mountain to find his kids. "Good. Where's Surf Cat?" God, where was that cat? "Chasing owls." Peter smiled and closed his eyes with another bout of coughing. No Ruslan. What had happened to him? Was he okay? In the distance to the north, she thought she could make out the small hill against the silhouette of the bigger foothills. She tried not to worry about Ruslan. More worry wouldn't help. She stared up at the clear sky and made up her own silly constellations. Then she slept for a while. When the moon was halfway to the western horizon, she gathered Peter up in her arms and started walking down the cleared road toward the distant hill.